No, we're good. And we're live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the 103rd celebration of Jack's birth. Had he been alive nowadays, he would have been alive now. And I'm here with, and I'm Tom Kraft, the president of the Jack Kirby Museum, and I'm here with
Elana Levin. Hello.
And
I'm Mike Cicchini, the secretary of the Jack Kirby Museum, and Rand Hoppy will be joining us momentarily.
And just to mention, we're live streaming across 3 different platforms at the same time. Periscope with Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And we have our application that will bring in all your comments into a comment window. So if you feel free to comment, ask questions, we'll try to address them as we move forward and maybe at the end as well. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Well, hello. I was really excited when you guys reached out to me for this. I didn't have any Jack Kirby Day plans, so.
And here's Rand.
There I am. I made it.
Hello.
And who are you?
I keep forgetting. If I didn't say it every hour on the hour, I would forget who I was. I'm Rand.
Oh my God.
What's
We almost were all wearing the same shirt, like this close.
Almost.
All wearing the same shirt.
That's right. I had the green screen behind me before, and I had a transparent blotch in my chest, so I had to turn it around to make it blue. So I'm the executive director. Hello. What have you guys been up to?
We did the introductions. We also talked about comments, so we're ready to get started. Do you want to share your screen?
Sure.
Presentation?
You got it.
Whee.
It's happening.
So this is this is the bio slide that I made when we did our panel at New York Comic Con about Jack Kirby's women characters. And I threw this together. I was like, okay, if folks have seen my work on Kirby, it's probably the piece I wrote for the Daily Beast. Although I do talk about him everywhere and anywhere that I possibly can. I think folks also might know me from Graphic Policy Radio, which is the podcast I've been hosting since like 2012, which is a lifetime in podcaster years.
It sure is. Wow.
Our slogan is where comics and politics meet, and really talking about the intersection of comics, social change, and the world around us. But yeah, I feel like I'm interviewing myself, so I'll take a minute and see where you guys want to give it a start. But if folks want to tweet at me, also, I probably won't watch Twitter live while we're doing this, but I will see your tweets later.
Yeah. No. So one of the things that did you make it to the first pop-up? Were you at Delancey Street?
I was
by the bridge. Yeah. It's always, for a while there, it was always like, oh, here comes Elana, yay! Always had a great time talking with you and seeing what ink might be new.
Oh,
that was always part of the fun.
Like Big Barda.
Yeah. I've been I was at the pop-up for the 2001 Space Odyssey, which I seriously can't thank you guys enough for doing that, because I would not have been able to see that work at that scale any other way, right? And Lord knows those copyrights live in hell, copyright hell. But that's where, that's where I ran into Tom, and Tom was like, "Can I see your arm for a second?" Like, yeah, I think I paid to have those inks done for that you have on the Big Barda piece, which I was like, that explains where those came from. Thank you, Tom. Because I've been working with the tattoo artist Sweetie, who works out of New York Hardcore Tattoo, and actually he used to work for DC in production, in the production department.
Wow!
So it was a complete coincidence that I found him, but we've been working on like a Jack Kirby sleeve for a number of years now. And when I decided I wanted to have Big Barda, we looked at literally every single potential pose that Big Barda has ever been in. And none of them seemed quite right for the space available. And then he came across the unfinished pencils for that Female Furies book that, that Kirby pitched that didn't get picked up like which is so unfortunate because God, I would have wanted that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were able to we sort of drew this off of 2 different sets of inks that were done. But it was nice to meet the co-creator, I suppose, of one of my tattoos. But
that would
definitely
be probably Mike Royer, because Mike is the one that did a lot
actually
of that.
Did the work. Yes.
Yeah.
I was really excited to have him on here and to listen to what he had to say during the live stream.
Yeah. He's an always entertaining and guest, and you know, the more we talk to him, we try to get them, you know, a different angle or a different story out of him, because I think he's been talking, you know, so often for so many years that he kind of gets in. He has his stories, and that it's a challenge to not a challenge, but it's fun to be able to get a different angle on some of the regular stories that he's been telling.
Yep.
So what is it about Jack Kirby that makes you so, you know, such an avid Kirby person?
Well, let's jump around just a little bit in this.
Sure.
So hit forward. We'll talk. We can talk about my Daily Beast piece later if you want. But hello. We can you can go to next.
Keep going.
So here we go. So my first exposure to Jack Kirby that I was aware of as being Jack Kirby, it probably was my first exposure, period. I'd gotten this like Marvel, the history of Marvel book that came out in the 90s when I was young teenager. And it included a couple of full comics reprints. And one of them in it was This Man, This Monster, which I still stand is like the best single issue of a comic in the world. And I'm not somebody who likes to rank things, but for some reason that was just very clear to me. Like, this is it. This is the first single issue. That's not generally how I choose to engage in art, but
Sure.
So next slide. I mean, the thing that got me is, even though I was young, I came at looking at comics art from having grown up in the DC area and going to museums all the time. So I was exposed to modern art and pop art and abstract expressionism and cubism. And I'm like looking in this comic book and I see this artist is doing these things. And he's doing them in the 60s. Like, that's amazing. And so really it was the Jack Kirby machines and the collage work that first really got me excited about his art, and the art was the thing that stood out for me most. And so, a lot of people have Jack Kirby character tattoos, but I'm like the person who has the Jack Kirby architecture and design motif tattoos. I have where are we? We have Supertown over here. I have some various motifs and designs in a mother box, and this glove actually, this particular gauntlet is from the Silver Surfer, but around the band is a number of different design motifs and obviously a little mother box in the middle there. But we got Supertown in here, and I'm working on a version of the Radical Cube that will work in an ARM type space. But because who doesn't want like a Radical Cube? Everything
Radical
about
Cube.
that,
come on,
right? Like this is like sort of a leftist utopian word if I heard about it. But so I came into Kirby like really appreciating him from a fine arts perspective.
And that's interesting. Yeah. And
it wasn't until I read Fourth World that I really got into the writing as well as the visuals.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up consuming massive amounts of 60s pop culture, first through my parents and then through my own devise. And I think it was comics writer and artist Ethan Heitner, who works on World War III, who I think told me, like, hey, you're going to really like Jack Kirby's Fourth World. And he was right. If you want to jump back to the earlier stuff.
Oh, sure.
My earlier slides. So the thing folks have may have read is I had a piece in the Daily Beast comparing Glorious Godfrey to Donald Trump. And it was one of those things where it just was instantly came together, although it was right after the election. Beginning from the splash page, and you have like, basically it looks like Rudy Giuliani is in this crowd shot. But if you've ever seen like an array of white people who are been brainwashed, and there you had it. And I just deeply appreciate it. My family are Holocaust survivors, and Jack fought like in World War II. I appreciated his going there when it came to literally like, I am going to quote Adolf Hitler and show you exactly how strong these parallels are.
Oh, no.
What happened? I'm here. Am I here?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry. So no, no. Okay, so you can go to the next one. So in this essay, folks can read on Daily Beast. I highlight a number of parallels between Glorious Godfrey. Certainly, the reality TV personality, the performance, the showmanship, handing out little hats to people that they need to wear to keep their political beliefs in line.
Yeah.
And the entire concept of anti-life is just a powerful metaphor for fascism.
Yes.
Signing away your ability to have free thought. And in place, you're going to adhere to this collective, like, wiping of individuality, and you'll find peace in it.
Yes.
And so it sort of shows you why this is seductive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for folks to understand that if they're going to do anything to combat it. But, I know that Billy Graham was actually who Jack Kirby had in mind when developing Glorious Godfrey. But, but I'm like, yeah, but it was the future of America in so many disturbing ways.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
So yeah, I have this piece. I hope folks check it out. I don't want to recycle too much of stuff that people have heard me speak on before, but it still remains to be as disturbingly timely as ever. I mean, the fascist imagery of the stand with the eagle wings, eagle wings motif, completely coming out of fascism. If you want to go to next. But so for me also, like, one of the draws to Kirby was his just psychedelic artwork, and the more mind blowing, the better. And it's so impressive to see someone who fought in World War II, who also really understood like the psychedelic and hippie zeitgeist so thoroughly. Some of the slang might be invented, but the sentiment was there.
Oh yeah.
If you want to go to the next one.
Oh sure, of course.
So yeah, Forever People have always been one of my favorites for that reason. And just these really far out there character designs and the clothing and the costumes. And that also was another piece of got me interested in Kirby in the initial beginning. It was like the fashion of this, the clothes on everybody. It was so, like, it reminded me a lot of Pierre Cardin's fashion designs from the 60s. Not so much Seraphim, but all the others. It was like Mary Quant. And like, it looked like there was a lot of high-end 1960s fashion happening in these comics pages. And it's interesting because when you read the Eternals, which was written much later, it's still the same fashion, but I don't care because I really enjoy that look. If you want to hit up next, Rand, when you were like, so you can kind of talk about whatever you want to talk about here.
Yep.
I had this moment of, I rant about this particular 2-pager a lot, and there's never seems to be a good place for it. So this is a backup story, from Fourth World Tales of the DNA Project. It's 2 little pages, and they really do a lot here. I think in the hands of most writers and artists, if you began a page with like the name The Genetic Criminal, my immediate response might be, this sure sounds like it's probably going to be some eugenics thing that's going to be bad. But no, it's Jack Kirby. So it's a repudiation of eugenics, which is interesting because he talks about the gene code and things like that throughout so much of his work from this period and then later as well. But this piece remains really important to me because you have this test subject, he's beating up these military guards in the project. So you assume that he's the bad guy and they're the good guys. But you find out really quickly that actually he's beating up an infiltrator from the evil project and that he's only disarming somebody. He's not even killing anybody. And in the last panel here, he's saying like, gosh, I really hope I never become violent, which is what you feared. And the word of God here is, guess what? He never became violent against innocent people, even though he's a clone of a mafia serial killer. And so I think like, one of the questions that Jack poses a lot is violence nature? Is it nurture? Or is good and evil nature or nurture? And in this little 2-pager, it's so super condensed, but he just really wants you to know, nope, it's a choice. It's a choice. And you're not born evil. And here's this guy who had total evil genetics. And as far as the eye can see, he continued to not be violent. And I can't think of any reason why this 2-pager would exist other than to just really hammer it into you that he doesn't think that people are born lesser, regardless of their genetics or, might be. But if you want to go to the next one, the reason why Orion is so important and why so many of the contemporary characterizations of Orion, I feel like, are kind of like spitting in the face of the argument that Jack Kirby tried to make, is that you have this character who, his dad is dark side, and he has this genetic legacy of mental illness, and he has a proclivity towards being angry and having these feelings, but he's using mother box or medication therapy to help him remain positive. And well, he doesn't like mind wipe his personality. Like, he's not a cuddly fun guy. He's still nobody's idea of a good time at any kind of party, right? But he is a hero. And he's truly a hero because he struggles with his anger and with his and his rage. And so you can say, like, even if you're born with with mental illness and with some of these challenges, there's nothing wrong with using mother box to try to help you cope. And you're even more of a hero because of those struggles. So he's not denying that, like, we have, a mental illness and emotional problems we might overcome, but you can be a hero anyway. And so I feel like Orion is actually spinning off right here in my super town, because that profile of him on the Astro harness cannot be confused with like literally any figure in the world. Like, he invented a very clearly unique profile for him. But I think Orion is incredibly important, and it's important for Orion to not be a bad guy, because if you have Orion go evil, then you're just basically saying genetics are destiny. Yeah, and like, that's some Hitler shit. Excuse me, language. Can we curse? Like, oh yeah, no, seriously. Okay, I mean, that's some Hitler stuff to say, like, your genetics are your destiny. So, God bless Orion, for his struggles and for being no fun at parties, and, like trying his hardest.
Putting up with that young but cool Harvey Lockman guy,
Yeah. Oh my God. I love the supporting cast.
I do too.
In them, because, and they remind me a lot of the supporting cast in The Demon. Because they're just like, we're just regular people. What role could we have to play in, like, standing up to? And Kirby's like, you have a role to play. Like, I know you're an insurance salesman, but we need you to fight against fascism. I know you're boring.
Country boy.
I know you're boring, but we're counting on you. And like, that's important, She's like, I'm just a secretary. Like, yeah, we need you too. And I hope folks take that to heart in the current political environment, that it's on all of us to take action. But yeah, the Demon and his supporting crew of advertising agent, and also literal person who's a UN delegate, because he doesn't have anything else he has to do with his spare time. He's just like, sure, I'm up for your shenanigans, even though I'm literally in the United Nations. We're up for fun there. So yeah, the supporting casts are great in those books. Actually, speaking of supporting casts, I'm going to just have a moment of appreciation for the greatness that is Alicia Masters as a character.
Yeah.
She is a working artist who makes representational sculptural art during the time of modernism, like being the coolest thing in the world in New York. And she's still like making a living doing it.
And she's blind.
And she's blind, exactly. Like she is like pushing a boulder up a hill, and she's still successful. And like, I don't think that anybody within the page quite gets how tremendous an achievement that is. But I will definitely say, like, Alicia Masters, like, you are really just killing it, I mean, that art she was making was not fashionable at that time.
No.
The Jeff Koons thing was a long way off.
Yeah.
And she was a blind woman and like popular enough that this was her day job. I really do love Alicia Masters. And one of the things I should probably get back to it at some point. I was doing an in-world style. So I guess for the purposes that we're talking about here, you could call it a fanfic, but an in-world piece of art criticism reviewing an Alicia Masters retrospective. That, like, from the perspective of like somebody writing for like Flash Art or Art in America. What would a critic be saying about her career retrospective? So hopefully that's the kind of thing I can bring to it as someone who grew up reading a lot and studied art history, and like I was also a big comics nerd. I can talk about that through that lens.
This sounds like the foundation of a really meta pop-up that we do at some point in the future, like where we just treat Alicia as if she's a real person.
I am here for it. Like I mean, really, like what a cool character. And it's Ben whose self-doubt keeps them from getting married. She's like, I don't care that you're a giant rock guy. Like she's like, that seems cool.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I could definitely see why a sculptor in particular would appreciate that, you know. And it's his own self-doubt, you know, that's the tragic
jealousy.
reason.
He's always jealous of the Silver Surfer, and always thinks that she's going out with someone.
It's sad, but I'm glad they finally got married. You know, I'm glad it was a Jewish wedding. That was nice as well.
Yeah.
What did I throw in here next? I don't even remember. Oh yeah. I love Big Barda, obviously. I think people kind of expect me to love Big Barda. But I think that one of the things that she should really be celebrated for, this characterization, I mean, is that both Orion and Mr. Miracle have very plot-driven personal history reasons for joining the rebellion, so to speak. And Barda just like makes this choice that she's going to do it. She is a high-ranking person within the machine of fascism, right? She's like running the Furies, and she's like, no, I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. I'm going to stand up against it. And she doesn't have a father or fake father, you know, whose influence might be pushing one way or another of this. And she just makes that choice independently. So yeah, this is an amazing panel.
Yeah, it is.
It really is.
You think about like the weight of the cannon, and she's kind of like just has it on her shoulder like a strap or something. And she's got it perfectly balanced, of course.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And you know, this little historical replica, whatever. Do you want to go next slide?
I remember when we were talking to Kate Willard yesterday, and I realized that was like, oh, like Big Barda's like quite possibly Jack's like very strong response to all the shenanigans that was going on with his female characters over at Marvel. You know, just no, here she is. She's huge. She's strong. No bull crap. You know,
there's no writer could possibly undermine that.
Right.
Like, it's just there.
Yeah.
Oh
man.
And so I have a piece about OMAC, or rather, it's sort of like I was interviewed about OMAC, but my answers were typed up right in form for Shelf Dust. Shelf Dust is doing a Infinite Crisis Explained, and when the guy from Shelf Dust tweeted, "Who here's got OMAC feelings?" I was like, "Oh, I have OMAC feelings." So they interviewed me on OMAC. Folks can see more from me, specifically about the importance of Buddy Blank, coming out in early September, I believe, on their website. But I just think that OMAC issue 1 is one of the most feminist comics like you could possibly imagine happening in the year it was created. If you want to talk about the literal objectification of women and how it's not just bad for women, it's actually bad for men too. Yeah. Here's a comic book that is just about that. The image of the legs, and let's face it, like this is her head in the place of the vulva, right? Like her head is like, this is, you're going to go and have sex with this. Like this is the objectification of the body. And like he's showing you, this is creepy. Like this is not how you want to be interacting with women. And what I love is like Buddy Blank is such a ridiculous incel that he cannot tell that he's not talking with an actual woman. Like he just wants this repository for his feelings and his pain. You know, like he's just going to like lay this on her, and he doesn't know that she's not having her part of the conversation. He's having a one-way conversation, and he just doesn't even know. And so I love, you know, when you go into where you can see all the other bodies and like just these arms and legs coming out of this box. Yeah, like that's objectification, and it's showing that the emotional labor that like women perform in conversations with these men who don't recognize their humanity is like not a real relationship. And as it literally does in the case of the guy who you see get blown up by his build-a-friend, it can explode and blow back on you. Yeah. You know, I really enjoy OMAC in general, but I think OMAC number 1, I put that on my list of like top number 1 issues that we did for Shelf Dust because it's very self-contained and like it is very powerful.
Mike, OMAC number 1 was a big deal for you, right?
Yeah, OMAC number 1 is a big part of my personal Jack Kirby origin story, but it was like because it was like the first old comic I bought with my allowance. It's like, okay, you can buy an old comic, you know, like there's a store that sells old comics, and like who wanted this at that point, you know what I mean? And I'm like, but I recognized who Jack was at that point, maybe, but I bought this because it was old and it was a first issue. And I was way too young to understand the subtext. And this made me really uncomfortable and like it was really disturbing.
Yeah.
But I read it dozens of times because it was unlike
Can't get
anything I've
enough.
ever seen.
Well, and you
like,
knew you were
as a
seeing
kid,
something.
Yeah, but I didn't know what it was. You know? Yeah, this book is amazing. This whole series is amazing, but you're right. This first issue is really spectacular. And it might be it's easily up there with my favorite work he did at DC. Oh
yeah. I most of the stuff that I write about Kirby's work is his work in DC. Actually, I've realized this over time, especially when people are like want to talk about losers, and I'm like, but yeah. So I mean, I think OMAC is really cool, and I don't acknowledge any later OMAC. It's just, and that's not to say that I don't acknowledge. I mean, I like Cecil Castellucci and Adriana Mello's Female Furies. I think is great. People can revisit his very singular vision-driven works. I just don't think that OMAC is something that people have really understood yet, which is, if you want to go next. So I'm glad you had Kate on. I wished Kate could have been present for the panel that we did at New York Comic Con because her work has been a revelation. I don't want to like recycle what she talked about, but I think, you know, if you're a fan, if you're someone who's feminist or queer or some other marginalized, I don't want to speak for people of color because I'm not, but like, and you're reading old comics and you love them to a certain extent, you're reading against the text in places because there's things that you're going to see that you're like, this doesn't honor or respect me. This doesn't treat me the way I want to be treated. But when it came to a lot of the Kirby comics, like you still kind of are like, but I'm still in there somewhere. Like underneath this, there's still something. And it was so gratifying to see Kate wipe away, like literally wipe away the sexist words and be like, yeah, here's a comic about a woman kicking ass. I'm like, I felt like that was there. I like feel like that was somewhere underneath it all. And I guess it's sort of like, this is what was always there that was hidden and it's what it could have been. And I love her point that like the story that ends up getting told isn't as good. Like it's not as good storytelling. And I think it shows you the way that like sexism puts blinkers on your ability to be a good storyteller. It's just not as good art, like regardless of like your value system. Right. Yeah. If you want to go to the next one. Yeah. But like just all of this, like, it just having her show me what it really is happening. It's just been amazing. If you want to go to the next. So I want to talk as PFP. I saw that some, you know, one of the other folks talk about the Eternals. Did you guys talk about the movie at all when you were talking about the Eternals? No.
A little bit with Charles Hatfield yesterday.
Yeah,
that's true. It's very low.
I want to talk about the Eternals just a little bit. Sure. When the Eternals were announced, there was a whole thing where people were like, well, nobody cares about the Eternals. And when they started to announce the more racially diverse casting, which I was like, yes, people were like, well, nobody cares about the Eternals. So if anybody is complaining about having, you know, Ajax be like, you know, Salma Hayek, who's Latina and Middle Eastern, like descent, like, then they're just saying this because they're bigots. And I'm like, it's true. They are just saying it's because they're bigots. But I do care about the Eternals. And I think it's great to have the Eternals be cast in a more diverse way. There's literally like, they're literally Mayan. They came from space, but they're existing in like a Mayan context. Like it's, and why not bring along everybody? But I just didn't like the idea that nobody cares about the Eternals. It's not my favorite Kirby work, but there's a lot of fun stuff happening in there. A lot of my friends teach at CUNY. So I like was running around like, look, guys, this happened on campus. CUNY, City
Right.
University of New York. Like, I love how rooted in New York City the Eternals gets when they show up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I love how Cersei is just like a complete bitch living her best life in Soho, hanging out with artists and not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
Like, she is not nice. She's just having her time. And like, you know that she's like hanging out with all the cool artists. She's like practicing her Martha Graham dancing in the living room style, you know, and like, you know that she's got some Alexander Calder statues somewhere in there. Right. I mean, this whole thing is like, there is literally no indication that any of this was made in the 80s at all. And that's like, okay. But so I think it's a lot of fun. I think Circe is a lot of fun. And I appreciate them being, showing up in the anthropology class and like answering questions from the students. And it feels like it's a very New York centered story when it's not literally taking place in like a ziggurat elsewhere. Yes. But yeah, like I've always wondered, and maybe you guys know, was there an exhibit of Mesoamerican art that was like a particularly like, hey, everybody, look at this Mesoamerican art happening like right around the time that Jack was working on the art? Like we know Chariot of the Gods and the works of whoever that guy was, like the fake, I'm sorry to say fake, but he was like a fake spiritualist who was like using a lot of Mesoamerican stuff in his work, but I've always been curious if like Jack was like literally going into the Metropolitan Museum of Art and like looking at Mesoamerican art when he was working on the Eternals.
Yeah, I don't have anything about that. It's cool to hear you point out that strong sense of New York, because it is there. But there he was on a hilltop in California.
In California, yeah.
So
I guess he missed us after all.
A little bit,
that's interesting because it's true. Marvel is very New York City centered, but he could have, because this is a very personally driven, he could have decided this was going to happen in California.
Absolutely.
I don't think Marvel would have said, no, this has to be in New York.
Right. And he also read a lot of books. He had tons of history books and all that. So he really knew about the Mayans and all ancient civilizations.
I love the National I feel like if you grew up with National Geographic around the house, like you can literally see the National Geographic. I often like literally cut and paste into collage for him, but like I feel like Nat Geo in particular, But yeah, I've just always sort of been curious, like when you see these particular pieces of art referencing other cultures' art, like if because you really do have like the world at your doorstep in New York City when it comes to access to museums and stuff.
Yeah. And a lot of times people will correlate things that appear in Jack's work with what may have been in magazines, art magazines, science magazines, Life and Time. They are able to track some of that stuff because Jack was looking at all of that. So sometimes it might just even be that, like suddenly there was an awesome article in Nat Geo, on this stuff, So it's an interesting venue.
I'm hoping that that the movie preserves some of that.
Yeah.
Who the heck knows? But the casting sounded cool. I don't know why Black Knight isn't anything. Black Knight is like the worst. To quote the folks from Tighten Up the Defense podcast, Black Knight made the choice in 1972 or 73. I forget. Black Knight chooses to go back and fight in the Crusades with the Europeans. Like, you had every chance to realize that was not the right side.
Yeah.
You chose this, so like screw the Black Knight.
I mean, Steve Englehart up to, man.
Well, the thing is, Steve Englehart like kind of also knows better. He's a very political writer and like quite astute in a number of different ways. But
I don't know if it was him, but I'm just saying, off the cuff.
That's true.
Like,
that's true.
Who was that writer who did that? Like, come on.
But yeah, Steve Englehart is really an interesting writer. I actually want to give a plug from one of my friends. Steve Attewell is a historian who's been writing a series at Graphic Policy called A People's History of the Marvel Universe. And he's also an expert specifically on Captain America, but he's done amazing work. He has essays like Captain America at Altamont, when that time Captain America saved Altamont, and just really looking at the way American history plays out in Marvel Comics. But he also specifically talks about, the early Captain America, Jack Kirby, Joe Simon, like stuff that I really recommend that. If you want to go to what's next.
Oh, sure.
What is next? Oh, that's just me again. Do I have any other? Maybe I don't have any other. Maybe I don't have any other. I don't have any other pictures. Well, that's cool. Yeah. I can certainly keep talking. But yeah, I feel like, one of the things that like, drew me into deciding to like launch my podcast through Graphic Policy was, comics are always engaging in dialogue with the world around them. And that can be in the form of engagement with what's happening in art, be it film, studio art, any of that. as well as like the political world around us. And I just wanted to make sure that people were drawing these strands together and seeing them. So, you know, I love doing a close read of anything and pulling that out. And the other piece of our format is, you know, I interview writers and artists about their work themselves. So, but yeah, I guess like the next deep dive we'll be doing is not Kirby related, sorry, but might be of interest to folks. It's I'm going to be looking at Ann Nocenti and JRJR's Daredevil, which especially Daredevil Inferno, which as a New York, it's just all about New York turning into hell. And as a New Yorker who's tired of there's people talking about their city as if it's currently descended into hell. It has not, but if you keep kicking people out of their apartments, it will. Important to talk about like how that New York existed in the paranoid imaginations, but also like the struggles the city really faced. But also Ann Nocenti is like the best Daredevil. I'll just put it out there.
Okay.
Sorry, Jack. Sorry. Like it's, although, you know, obviously like developing the character, you know, as it did, like you would, you know, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, did you guys have stuff you wanted to hit on in particular, or I'm a podcast host. I can keep going.
You're more than welcome to keep going, but wondering.
We could take some questions.
Yeah, let's see what we have.
You know, like there's some folks who have been commenting. If you want to comment on this, here's something that agrees with what you were saying earlier.
Yeah. It's so amazing. And again, like as a kid who like grew up going to the Natural History Museum, and again, it's a little bit messed up to have art from people from other countries in a natural history museum instead of an art museum. And that's something that's changed since the 1980s. It's been changing recently, but like I was like recognizing that in his work was really important for me getting excited about it. I think like, you know, I was getting into comics in the early 90s, and there was a lot of really, to my aesthetic sense, really terrible art happening. And it was the older stuff that really spoke to me visually, that really attracted me. And I always appreciated that, even as a kid.
Michael Hill has a question for you.
Ooh,
have you seen Chris Tolworthy's analysis?
Yeah,
I haven't either.
Chris Tolworthy's been doing some great stuff. He does Facebook things, but then he has had a site. I think it's called Zach Site or something. But Chris has some really interesting things, analyses of Kirby stuff. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I you know,
thanks, Michael.
Actually, to hit on it briefly, like the issue of Fantastic Four, where you know they go to Wakanda for the first time, is so good on so many levels. For one thing, I love that Wyatt Wingfoot is hanging out with them there. Like again, like the amazing supporting cast, and like Wyatt Wingfoot is such a great character. Like I don't want to speak for the opinions of Indigenous people on him, but like to an outsider, it's like here you have an Indigenous character who doesn't have any like weird Indigenous superpowers. He's just like a college athlete. He's a cool guy. He's a popular guy. He's really handsome. People like him. He doesn't have like super nature sense. I'm like, these are not mystical. It's just people like other people. But so Wyatt Wingfoot is with them, and that, you know, people are just like, yeah, cool. Like there's this futuristic society. It's in Africa. We're not going to say like that's impossible. We're going to like engage in their cultural things and find it interesting and rolling with it and like not challenging the possibility of its existence. And you know, I think it's a really fun issue. And I think it's a really important how they handled it that way from the first moment. Oh, yeah. You know, I wish they didn't, the color work of making, I mean, it's clear, like when you have Black Panther, T'Challa, and his skin is brown, like a human being. And then you have like the side characters and their skin is gray in that sort of really awful gray color that was used for like a lot of the bad coloring work done of African-American and Black and African characters. It's very strange. Like it really shows you that like, if we care about this person, we can make them brown, you know. I don't know. I don't want to like sit here slagging the colorist, and I don't know exactly technology, but it does look to me like they could have done a better job on some of these people because T'Challa looks great.
Right.
I love those designs though, and that is a really fun issue.
There's been people have done an analysis about like mining and rare metals in Africa. There was a whole thing going on in the early 60s that they've completely tied it up. I don't remember exactly who it was that did the work, but they
so makes sense.
So it's like it all it's like, yeah, Jack is reading the newspapers, reading the news magazines.
I love it. And if we want to like understand art, like we have and understand what it's saying, like it's important for us to do the same. I mean, none of this exists in a vacuum, and I don't think that it would be as good if it did. The meaningfulness of the deliberate propaganda in the Captain America, like from the perspective of Jewish people, like we knew that the Holocaust was happening. Like there's a lot of people pretend that like we do. And America had a deliberate policy of excluding Jews because they thought we were communists.
Yep.
And like anything that could be made to make the case like, no, this man is an existential threat, period. And you need to like take it seriously is enormous. And the invention of a superhero, whose priority is like fighting fascism, like from the get-go. God bless that. It's so important. And I mean, there's a great column from Stephen Attewell actually about like, looking at people who are avoiding paying taxes and like war profiteers, like right away, in those stories.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But for me, like definitely it was more of the later Silver Age and early Silver Age, but especially like later Silver Age art that just really, really speaks to me from the psychedelic sensibilities and the people he's drawing.
Yeah.
But you and I, we did a thing because Rand, you were going abroad. Remember when people could go abroad? You were abroad when Sci-Fi Wire approached
us about
they were doing a piece, not Sci-Fi Wire, but a sci-fi channel was doing a piece, and they wanted to do something about the walking tour that you had done, and you weren't able to be there. And thank you for grabbing me. I was really happy to thank you for those resources. One of the things so we were doing a tour of Jack Kirby's Lower East Side, basically.
Right.
And one of the things that, I got into through your resources was looking at the importance of the Guardian in the Newsboy Legion and the role of Boys Republic and how that was like such an important piece of introducing Jack to a positive space where he could make art and develop his own sort of like part of a tree. Because the thing with the Boys Brotherhood Society thing, I'm butchering the name, is that
BBR,
it was a
BBR.
The BBR, it was a Boys Brother Republic. It was a democratically elected system, like run by the boys. Like this wasn't like some top down, like adults telling kids what to think and what to do. And it was rooted in the liberation and democracy of these kids and their own voices. And you see that in how he's writing and drawing the kids in so many of these stories as well. But Guardian definitely like seems like a good parallel for the founder of the Boys Brotherhood Republic, who would have been in those spaces then. And also like looking at this place through the settlement house model, which was something where, like Jewish people who had more assets were funding art classes for folks living in the tenements. And like, it was really like this social network that was built in the Lower East Side to address the dire straits of the tenement and ghetto life that was actually able to help Jack survive and flourish. That it was not just like, I mean, you don't get anywhere without genius, but that is important to also have this community built up to support the ability to have the creative expression, and community building up to offer art classes and stuff like that. And like, right now we have so many artists who are not able to make money and so many kids bored at home. And I just want like everybody to be getting your art teachers online and getting your kids into those classes, and like being able to like make art together now is so important on every level. And you just see that, and you just see that really clearly in Jack's work.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Please. Yeah. Kate. Hi, Kate. I think Stan Lee's views on gender prejudice probably evolved with the times, staying in line with mainstream. If Kirby lived longer, do you think his views would have always remained ahead of the mainstream? I have no reason to believe that Jack Kirby wouldn't have continued to remain ahead of the mainstream. I mean, because I don't want to like ascribe every difference between him and Stan to class differences, which existed in their upbringing. But like, history shows like where Kirby was at, And, like appreciating that, like Stan certainly was not retrograde, but but the thing that people forget is like women always knew that this treatment was bad. You just have to listen to them telling you like, I don't like being treated shittily. I'm depressed. But yeah, I definitely think like Jack and Jack's ability to identify with and celebrate youth rather than say everything was better back in my day.
Yeah.
Like, his embracing of the hip of counterculture and 60s stuff, like you can say like, oh well, this is just commercial because this is what was hip, but you can sense that he actually is excited to see it. The glory boat wouldn't exist like it does if he wasn't like, yeah, war resisting is legit. So
we had
I think that
we had Jack's one of Jack's friends, David Russell, on yesterday.
Yes, it was so good.
It was really good.
It was great.
Just that Australian delay, the around the planet delay. It was like but it's funny to like be able to have please check out David's video, people.
It's really great, folks. I really loved it.
And I loved coming out of it with David calling Jack a stalwart humanist. And that's
it's a great
tingle thinking about Jack that way. It's just like it really makes me feel closer to Jack and my own thoughts about things and all kinds of stuff. It's
it is beautiful. I mean, but he's also a product of a New York City that was invested in building community structures to support each other and building like. I think it would have been a very different life for him if he wasn't in New York City and if it wasn't in a time where people were beginning to start realizing that they needed to build out these support networks for each other. And a lot of that coming from Jewish community and radical Jewish traditions as well.
Yes.
And I would love to be able to do more work on Jack Kirby in that space. But speaking of futuristic stuff, I do want to shout out OMAC, Buddy Blank. He gets his powers through like hormone surgery from space. And I have had numerous friends of mine who are trans who love Kirby who are like, yes, hormone surgery from space. And like, I mean, that's an amazing concept. And like, why not have hormone surgery from space for everyone, not just for Buddy Blank, who like becomes a better person once, he stops like being in his like kind of pathetic, world. But
well, I'm
calling Buddy Blank the ultimate incel is like the greatest thing. Like,
it's so. But God, what a cool costume design! Like that costume design is awesome.
Oh, it's awesome. Mohawk, it's great.
I don't think it's a mohawk. I think it's a centurion helmet, but like of hair.
A Roman.
That's right. Yeah.
For me, at least, like that's what I mean. If it's true, like I don't know, Roman centurion helmet of hair is sort of what it always feels like for me with him. But and that's why people keep wanting to make OMAC stuff. Like even if they don't know what the hell it means, they're like, yeah, but that costume is cool.
Right.
And I want people to keep drawing the Kirby costumes because I don't think any of them have ever really been improved on. No. You can maybe change the colors to go with the colorist scheme that you're working with, but those fashion designs are just magnificent.
So Michael Hill mentions that Chris Tolworthy and Pat Ford on Facebook. There we go. So they were talking about the African mining with the Kentangan rebels because Roy Thomas was criticizing Kirby for the tiger name because there aren't any tigers in Africa, but then the rebels actually called themselves the Tigers. So like whatever.
People have imagination. It's like I mean, and I definitely love the like there's something in the water moments that happen, like the Black Panther Party and Black Panther kind of like developing simultaneously and separately. And you had Doom Patrol and X-Men and I don't want to get too much into that, but like there's something in the water moments, like there is like a thing, there's a thing in there. There's something in the zeitgeist of it. But I mean, I would also say like if there's particular, Kirby topics you want to have jumped into, like, pitch me on stuff for the podcast.
I know you invited me, but I was so busy setting this up. I know.
Well, you'll come back. You'll do it for sure.
I would love
we had on wow, my brain fell out of my ear. The author of the amazing Marvel book that everybody's constantly referencing.
Sean Howe.
Thank you. Sean
sure.
Howe was on the show a while back. That was great. You know, I'm glad you guys are going to have Abe Reisman. Abe is going to be on the show as well. But you're always really happy to talk about that, that history as well. And what I really want to do is I feel like there's a lot of discourse that happens in comics that emphasizes, I mean, it's really important to have diverse creators making art for people to see and read, because it's always going to have a different perspective than what you would have coming from like a straight white man. But the idea that like we can't also, we meaning people who are not like cis white hetero white men, the idea that we can't also like find meaning and connect with with works that are before our time and from, you know, people who have different identities is not really helpful. Like, and I really do want to encourage like anybody who's kind of got on the message that like if you're a girl, the comics that are for you are by contemporary women comics creators, like those are for you, but also like you can get things out of this older work.
Sure
and,
yeah.
you know, I might have a higher tolerance for reading some stuff that might be like sexist or messed up in some way. Yeah. But like we have always, but there's still stuff in it, and especially in the work of Kirby, that shows that like he wants to be there. Like he's trying, he is trying his darndest, and that the art has such like beauty and ingenuity that it really can stretch across the time and space, and it still means so much.
And I feel like it's time. That was like the perfect way to just say, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Folks can follow me on Twitter, ELANA_Brooklyn, ELANA_Brooklyn. And thank you to the show and Graphic Policy Radio.
There it is. So we're going to head off and go into see Jamal Igle, and we'll see you soon. All right. Bye.